Why does your faithful marriage feel like a battlefield when no one else seems to notice? You stood before God, vowing to love and honor, yet silent struggles creep in, threatening the sacred bond you swore to protect. The world sees your smiles, your unity, your shared faith, but behind closed doors, you wrestle with unseen forces that test your commitment. These struggles aren't loud arguments or dramatic betrayals. They're quiet, insidious, and deeply personal, gnawing at the foundation of your covenant. The enemy prowls like a roaring lion, 1 Peter 5 verse 8, seeking to devour what God has joined together, and he doesn't always use obvious tactics. Sometimes it's the subtle drift, those moments you don't pray together, the unspoken resentment over small slights, or the exhaustion that makes you choose silence over connection. You might wonder why God allows these battles in a marriage built on faith. The truth is, your union is a threat to darkness, a living testimony of Christ's love for his church, Ephesians 5 verse 25, and that makes it a target. The first silent struggle is the weight of unmet expectations. You entered marriage with dreams of spiritual harmony, picturing nights of shared prayer and unshakable unity, but reality hits differently. One of you grows faster in faith, leaving the other feeling inadequate, or life's demands, bills, kids, work, still the time you meant to dedicate to God together. You feel disappointed, not in God, but in each other, and that disappointment festers in secret. Proverbs 13 verse 12 warns that hope deferred makes the heart sick, but you don't talk about it because you're supposed to be strong, faithful, unshaken. Yet God sees your heart, and he's not surprised by your struggle. He's working through it, refining you both. Romans 8 verse 28. Have you ever noticed those small moments when you want to reach out to your spouse, but hesitate, not out of anger, but because an invisible distance has formed? That's no accident. The enemy knows that missed moments of connection can build up, creating walls you didn't even see being constructed. You might pray for big things of healing, finances, guidance, but do you pray for your spouse's heart? Do you pray for your love to be renewed, for small wounds to heal before they become deep scars? God calls you to love as he loves, not with human perfection, but with patience and perseverance. 1 Corinthians 13 verses 4-7. Here's the secret. Unmet expectations aren't a sign of failure. They're an invitation from God to lean on his grace. He doesn't demand a perfect marriage. He demands your faithfulness, even if it means admitting you're struggling. Have you ever wondered why you feel alone, even when your spouse is right beside you? That's because this silent struggle isn't just about you and your spouse. It's about your covenant with God, and the enemy wants you to doubt it. But stand firm, because God is fighting for you even in the silence. Have you ever scrolled through social media, seen a Christian couple sharing about their joint prayer time, or stood in church watching a couple hold hands, smiling, seemingly perfect, and wondered why your marriage doesn't look like that? The second silent struggle is the temptation to compare, a subtle trap that makes you feel your marriage is lacking, not spiritual enough, not loving enough. You see that husband leading his family with confidence, or that wife supporting her husband with joy, and you wonder why your spouse isn't like that. You see posts about romantic date nights, powerful prayers, or spiritual moments, and your heart tightens, not out of envy, but because you believe you're failing. Galatians 6 verse 4 reminds you to test your own actions, but the enemy whispers that you're not enough, that your marriage isn't Christian enough. Here's the shocking truth. What you see is only the surface, curated moments, not the whole story. That couple you admire has their own sleepless nights of arguments, days of doubt, their own silent struggles. But you don't see that, and the enemy uses your blindness to sow discontent. God didn't call you to live someone else's marriage. He called you to love your spouse, with all their flaws and shortcomings, as he loves you. Ephesians 5 verse 2. Have you ever stopped to realize that your marriage, with all its struggles, is a miracle in the making? Every time you choose forgiveness, every time you pray despite exhaustion, every time you hold your spouse's hand despite a hurting heart, you're building a spiritual legacy the world can't see. But comparison is a thief, stealing joy and sowing discord. It makes you focus on what's missing instead of thanking God for what He's given. Do you dare to let go of the temptation to compare, to see your spouse through God's eyes, a person loved, redeemed, and being renewed daily? 2 Corinthians 5 verse 17. The third silent struggle is the hidden battle of intimacy, a fight you don't dare speak about, even to yourself. You remember the early days when a single touch or a glance set your heart racing, but now that fire feels like a fading ember. It's not just physical intimacy, though that fades too. It's the emotional and spiritual connection that once made you feel like one. Genesis 2 verse 24. You feel distant, as if an invisible wall has grown between you, and you don't know how to tear it down. The world says intimacy is about fleeting pleasure, but God designed it as a sacred bond, a gift to strengthen and renew your covenant. 1 Corinthians 7 verses 3 to 5. When intimacy fades, you feel rejected, hurt, even ashamed. You might blame yourself. Maybe you're not attractive enough, not spiritual enough, or quietly blame your spouse, thinking they're not trying hard enough. But here's the secret. The enemy wants you to stay silent, to let shame build walls where vulnerability should reign. Have you ever considered that those stolen moments of intimacy aren't your fault or your spouse's, but part of a larger battle against your covenant? God sees the desires of your heart, and He doesn't turn away from them. He invites you to bring those hurts to Him, to seek healing and renewal. Do you dare to walk in truth, to tell your spouse you're struggling, that you crave deeper closeness, not just physically but in your souls? That's the first step to reclaiming what the enemy has tried to steal. The fourth silent struggle is the exhaustion of spiritual warfare, a relentless battle that wears you down in ways you can't always name. You're fighting for your marriage, but you're also fighting the world's pressures, the enemy's lies, and your own flesh, and it's draining. You pray for your spouse, but it's hard when you're angry. You forgive, but it stings when their words cut deep. You choose love, but it feels like a sacrifice when you're unappreciated. Ephesians 6 verse 12 reminds you that your struggle isn't against flesh and blood, but it feels personal when your spouse forgets your needs or overlooks your efforts. The enemy doesn't need to destroy your marriage outright. He just needs to tire you out, to make you feel like giving up is easier than pressing on. Have you ever felt so weary that you stopped praying together, not because you don't believe in God, but because you're too tired to fight the tension between you? That's the enemy's strategy, to isolate you from each other and from God, to make you think you're in this alone. But here's the hidden truth. God is your strength, and He equips you to stand firm. Isaiah 40 verse 31. Every time you choose to pray, even when it's hard, you're wielding a weapon the enemy can't counter. Every time you speak kindness instead of anger, you're tearing down his strongholds. You might feel like you're losing, but God sees every step you take in faith, every moment you choose to love despite the cost. Have you ever considered that your exhaustion isn't just physical or emotional, but a sign that your marriage is under attack because it matters? Your union is a reflection of Christ's covenant with His people, and the enemy hates it. He'll throw distractions, work stress, financial strain, petty arguments to keep you from the spiritual intimacy God designed for you. But God promises that those who wait on Him will renew their strength. Isaiah 40 verse 31. Do you dare to fight this battle on your knees, to pray for your spouse even when you're mad, to seek God's face together even when you feel distant? The enemy wants you to believe your marriage is too broken to fight for, but God says it's worth every ounce of effort. You're not just fighting for your spouse, you're fighting for the testimony God is building through you. Don't let weariness win. Lean into God's power, because He's fighting for you, even when you can't see it. The fifth silent struggle is the crippling fear of failure, a shadow that haunts your faithful marriage even when you don't speak it aloud. You lie awake at night, wondering if your marriage will survive the weight of these quiet battles, if you'll let God down, if your children will see your cracks, or if your testimony will crumble into hypocrisy. You fear that one wrong move, a harsh word, a moment of weakness, a failure to pray, will unravel everything you've built together. The enemy amplifies this fear, whispering that you're not strong enough, that your spouse deserves better, or that your struggles mean you've already failed. Psalm 56 verse 3 reminds you to trust God when you're afraid, but that fear feels so real, so personal when you look at your spouse and wonder if you're enough for them. You see the world's broken marriages, the divorces among even Christian couples, and you secretly worry yours could be next. Here's the shocking truth. This fear isn't just about your marriage. It's an attack on your faith, a lie designed to make you doubt God's power to hold you together. You think your marriage's success depends on your perfection, but God doesn't measure it by your flawless performance. He measures it by your faithfulness. 2 Timothy 2 verse 13. He sees every tear you've shed in prayer, every time you've chosen to stay when you wanted to walk away, every moment you've loved your spouse despite their flaws. Your fear of failure isn't a sign you're losing, it's proof you're in the fight, because only those who care deeply fear falling short. Have you ever considered that God allows this fear to draw you closer to Him, to remind you that your marriage isn't sustained by your strength but by His grace? You're not called to be a perfect spouse, you're called to be a faithful one, to keep showing up, to keep praying, to keep loving, even when it's hard. The enemy wants you to believe your marriage is fragile, that one misstep will destroy it, but God says that what He has joined together, no man or demon can separate. Matthew 19 verse 6. Your fear might tell you to hide your struggles, to put on a brave face at church or with friends, but God invites you to bring those fears to Him, to lay them at His feet and trust that He's working even in your weakness. 2 Corinthians 12 verse 9. Have you ever stopped to think that your marriage's imperfections are part of its testimony? The world doesn't need another perfect Christian couple. It needs to see a couple who fights for their covenant, who clings to God through pain, who chooses love when it's messy. Your kids don't need a flawless marriage. They need to see you and your spouse forgive, pray, and persevere. Your fear of failure might feel like a burden, but it's also a call to courage, a reminder that every step you take in faith is a victory over the enemy's lies. Do you dare to silence that fear by trusting God's promises over your doubts? You worry about letting God down, but He's not disappointed in you. He's proud of every moment you choose to honor your vows. You fear your testimony will falter, but your real testimony isn't in your success. It's in your steadfastness, your refusal to give up, your willingness to let God work through your brokenness. You're not failing, you're fighting, and every fight you face strengthens the legacy you're building. Don't let fear paralyze you. Speak truth to your spouse, confess your fears to God, and stand firm in the knowledge that He is for your marriage. Romans 8 verse 31. Your covenant isn't held together by your strength, it's held by His, and He never fails. These silent struggles, unmet expectations, comparison, fading intimacy, spiritual warfare, and fear of failure aren't just random hardships. They're calculated attacks on the sacred covenant you made before God. You feel the weight of each one, the way they pile up in the quiet moments when you're alone with your thoughts, wondering if your marriage can withstand the pressure. But here's the hidden truth. These battles are proof your marriage matters, that it's a beacon of God's love in a world desperate for hope. The enemy doesn't waste his time on insignificant targets. He attacks what threatens his kingdom, and your faithful marriage is a direct threat. You might feel like you're fighting alone, but God is with you, weaving every struggle into a story of redemption. Romans 8 verse 28. Have you ever paused to realize that every time you choose to love your spouse through pain, you're reflecting Christ's love for His bride? Every time you pray together, even when it's awkward, you're building a fortress the enemy can't breach. Every time you reject comparison, embrace vulnerability, or push through fear, you're claiming victory in a battle the world can't see. These silent struggles aren't meant to break you, they're meant to refine you, to make your marriage a testimony of God's faithfulness. James 1 verses 2-4. You might look at your spouse and see their flaws, their moments of distance, their failures to meet your needs, but God sees a work in progress, a heart He's shaping, just like yours. You're not called to fix each other, you're called to love each other, to bear each other's burdens, Galatians 6 verse 2, to point each other to Christ. Have you ever considered that the enemy's greatest fear isn't your perfect marriage, but your persistent one? He knows that a couple who keeps fighting, keeps praying, keeps choosing love despite the odds, is unstoppable. Your marriage isn't just about you and your spouse. It's about the kingdom of God, about showing the world that love rooted in Christ can endure anything. So, why do you hesitate to fight? Why do you let silence win when you could speak life into your marriage? The enemy wants you to stay quiet, to let resentment simmer, to let fear paralyze, but God calls you to action. Do you dare to break the silence, to tell your spouse you're struggling, to pray together even when it feels forced? Do you dare to reject the world's lies that love is fleeting, that intimacy is optional, that failure is inevitable, and cling to God's truth instead? Your marriage is worth fighting for, not because it's perfect, but because it's God's. He didn't bring you together by accident. He chose you for each other, to sharpen one another, Proverbs 27 verse 17, to glorify Him through your love. So stand up today. Choose to pray for your spouse, not just for their actions, but for their heart. Choose to forgive, not because they deserve it, but because Christ forgave you, Colossians 3 verse 13. Choose to pursue intimacy, not just in the bedroom, but in your souls, sharing your fears, your dreams, your faith. Choose to trust God with your marriage even when you can't see the outcome. These silent struggles are real, but they're not the end of your story. They're the crucible where God is forging something eternal. Your marriage isn't a fragile thing. It's a sacred vow, upheld by the one who never breaks his promises. So fight for it. Love fiercely. Pray boldly. Trust deeply. Your covenant is worth every battle, and God is with you every step of the way. Your faithful marriage is a battleground, not because you're failing, but because it's a sacred covenant the enemy fears. Those silent struggles, unmet expectations that wound your heart, comparisons that steal your joy, fading intimacy that builds walls, spiritual warfare that exhausts your soul, and the fear of failure that haunts your quiet moments, are not signs of defeat, but evidence of a fight worth waging. God sees every tear you've shed, every prayer you've whispered, every choice to love when it hurts, and He's not done with your story, Philippians 1 verse 6. The world may tell you to give up, to settle for less, to believe your marriage is too broken to save, but God says it's a masterpiece in the making, a testimony of His grace, Ephesians 2 verse 10. You're not called to a perfect marriage, but to a persistent one, to love fiercely, pray boldly, and trust deeply, even when the battles feel overwhelming. The enemy wants you to stay silent, to let shame and fear win, but God is calling you to rise up. Do you dare to break the silence today? To speak truth to your spouse, to confess your struggles to God, to fight for the covenant you vowed to uphold? Your marriage isn't just about you. It's a light in the darkness, a reflection of Christ's love for His church, Ephesians 5 verse 32. So choose now, reject the lies, embrace vulnerability, and lean into God's strength. Your struggles are real, but so is His power. Fight for your marriage because it's worth every battle, and God is with you, now and forever.